Hi, everyone. As I see people joining, we'll wait a little bit to get started. But welcome tonight. Yes, I see people saying hi in the chat. Everyone to say hello and where they're from. I know we're Margaret's from Newark, New Jersey. We've got Virginia. It's a lovely lady named Anita.
Who knows who that is?
Who knows? Jane, also from Newark. I know Jane. Look at this. Victoria from
Chicago.
Chicago. We know Vicky. Kim. All right. Hi, everyone. All right, we'll give it another 30 seconds and we'll get started and we'll just let people join as they come in. I want to be very respectful of everyone's time tonight. So let's kick it off. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marie Malloy, and I will be your moderator for tonight's workshop. This is the second of our four-part series called Cooking Up Health, led by chef and registered dietitian Tessa Nguyen. Did I say that right? We hope to see you
Yes.
at these events. Thank you, as Tessa tackles nutrition and cooking and overcoming different challenges faced by people managing food allergies, dietary restrictions, and other medical conditions that impede what they may or may not be able to eat. The series is sponsored by the generous support of Genentech. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few things. This presentation is being recorded, so to maintain a quality recording, you are all muted throughout the workshop. However, if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature on the Zoom, which will be either on the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on how you have it set up. I will be monitoring that. I will either answer them or ask Tessa to answer them during the presentation, or at the end, we can have a Q&A. At the close of the webinar, on your screen, there'll be a link to a survey. If you complete this survey, let us know how we did. 6 people will have a chance to win a $100 e-gift card. If you miss the link at the end, don't worry. 24 hours after the workshop is complete, you'll all get an email, and that link will be on there tomorrow night. Also, part of that email will be information on the Fair Neighborhoods Initiative, which is a program FAIR is doing in 6 communities throughout the country, focusing on educating and bringing awareness to underserved communities. There'll also be some links to some key information about food allergy. So now let's meet the presenter. I'll let her talk a little bit about herself, but I'll just a brief intro from me. Chef Tessa is the owner of Taste Nutrition Consulting. She's a registered dietitian and an educator with expertise in diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice within the food and nutrition industries. She has a passion for teaching people about accessible and affordable cooking and has experience creating meals for those with dietary restrictions. Tessa, take it away.
Thank you, Marie. Got my little bio there, as Marie mentioned, and just some disclosures here that I am being here on behalf of FAIR to be able to teach y'all today, so I appreciate you joining us. And I've always been passionate about food allergies, so I actually have food allergies, and my siblings and I have all had food allergies since we were younger. So that's kind of the reason why I got curious about food and cooking and eventually becoming a dietitian, because I really wanted to work with other folks who were trying to figure out how can I, eat safely and also eat the cultural foods that I grew up eating without necessarily feeling like you're missing out on those traditions and those special moments with your loved ones. So this kind of leads into my first question that I always ask people. And if you were here at our holiday, the last quarter that we had of the webinar, if you want to put in the chat if there's like a recipe that you tried that you loved from it last time, that'd be great to hear. And then also thinking of, what is your favorite food? So if you want to drop in the chat what your favorite food is, and if you can't choose one, sometimes it's hard to choose. Mac and cheese, yes, always a delicious one. And I have a photo here of pho, if anyone's had pho before. Um, I'm part Vietnamese, so beef noodle soup or pho is one of my favorite foods. I could eat it every single day of the week, and honestly, I could probably eat it like almost every meal if I switched up maybe some of the veggies that I add to it. But I ask this because food is such a way to connect with other people, regardless of the language we speak. Ooh, pasta, yes, any sort of pasta or carby yummies, as we call them, or noodles. Um, but food is such a connecting point, whether, you know, we speak different languages, we eat different foods, we have different food allergies, whatever it might be. So I kind of bring that as something that we can always ask and see and start that conversation and really just bring it forward to, okay, the next step of like, how can I be able to still enjoy my favorite food and work in and be able to manage my food allergies. So the first part I have here is eating the rainbow. Ooh, pizza. Yes, pizza is a delicious one. Mole verde, bread. And someone did plantains as well. Plantains are so good. So eat the rainbow. If you have worked with a dietitian or a nutritionist before, or even your healthcare practitioner or allergist working, whether you've been newly diagnosed or uh, you've managed food allergies throughout your life and maybe just kind of maintaining that, or maybe you've had food allergies all your life and now you have a new allergy to add into that. Eating the rainbow is something that's commonly said, but the main point that I want to share with you is just eating different colors. And so sometimes that could look like the top left picture where it literally looks like a rainbow. We have some red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple that's there, and some beige and whites and greens. Or sometimes it could be the photo on the right where it's monochromatic, it's all the same color of food. There's no right or wrong way, but it's just thinking of like how we're able to eat different food groups and incorporating different colors, mostly to make sure that, especially with food allergies, where there's some foods that we aren't able to eat, getting in those nutrients from other food groups that we are able to eat, to make sure that we're maintaining our nutrition as best as we can. And so, and even taking that conversation further too, you know, like when I was going to school to become a dietitian, and even a lot of the um, infographics and stuff that are out there now, FAIR is very inclusive with what they're sharing, of course, but a lot of it was very like, here's your carb, here's your start, or here's your protein, here's your vegetable, like very segmented. And for a lot of us, that's not how we naturally eat. And then for a lot of us with different cultural foods or diverse backgrounds, that's definitely not how we eat, because there's so many different things that are combination foods, whether it's stews, jjigaes, things like that, or even like at the plate here where there's different vegetables that are represented, whether they're pickled or fresh or whatever it might be. So thinking beyond just like those segmented colors and how they come together differently for all of us. And there's, again, no right or wrong way to be able to incorporate that nutrition. And most importantly, taste too. If it doesn't taste good, we're not going to eat it. And then sometimes, whether you're sick, you're busy, you're on the go, whatever it might be like a smoothie or a shake or something like this on the left with different fruits and maybe vegetables that are pureed in there. And sometimes it's just some broth or soup or something like that where it's like, I don't have time, I don't feel well, whatever it might be. So again, thinking of all different ways to get in nutrition that aren't necessarily those cut and dry ways that we've necessarily been accustomed to eating or being taught how to eat too. And this is something I always want to make sure I address, especially because when we think of, you know, how we're able to get our food and if we're getting enough food. And not only that, but are we eating enough? So as we talked about before, and I'm sure you've probably talked about with your healthcare practitioner, whether it's, you know, you're the caregiver of somebody with food allergies or you're the person with food allergies yourself, there might be one food group or many food groups you can't have anymore. So how do I make sure that I'm able to eat enough and feel full and satisfied in addition to getting the nutrients I need by making up for those one or two or however many food groups that are missing. So a lot of that comes into play in making sure that you're eating enough of the food that's safe for you to eat. And then moving to, is it safe? So taking that even further of, yes, maybe, for example, like potatoes. Yes, potatoes are safe for me to eat, but is it something that I really want to eat every day? Maybe, maybe not. Is it something that I can make like sweet? Can I make it savory? Can I add spices to it? Can I make it different tastes and textures and things like that, so that it's not only something safe for me to eat, but it's something I want to eat and enjoy. So taking into account all those questions, all those variables, and also, if it's with your kids, depending on their ages, and making sure that it's safe for them to eat, whether they're under 6 months or above 6 months, whatever the case might be, of the different forms of food that they're able to eat as well. And also taking into account the different cultural, religious, or different holidays and observances that we have, and thinking of how, to take into account our food allergies, but how that changes with the different seasons or different times of year too, of how we're able to manage our food allergies safely. And then, are you eating regularly? So I think out in the interwebs, the news, the media, all those types of things, you might hear different things, whether you should or shouldn't eat before or after a certain time, you should eat between this window of time, fasting is good, blah, 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 all these sorts of things. But really the same thing that we're talking about is, I wanting to make sure that you're eating enough and eating when you're hungry. Because that's our body's way of telling us that we need to eat something, right? We can't ignore that that innate desire, innate kind of little trigger for ourselves to be able to eat something. And going further into this too, I'll show you some pictures as well, is eating whatever foods we have accessible to us, because sometimes, whether we're going to the market, if there's a farmer's market, if we're going to the food pantry, if we have a garden or a CSA or something like that, just thinking of all the ways that we have perhaps access or lack of access to food, and how we're able to prepare those safely and consume them regularly in a way that's safe for us too. So again, all forms of food count. I am the dietitian who's like, what can we add to your diet? Because I think a lot of us have heard for so long that, let's take this out, let's take this out, this is good or bad, whatever, putting labels on food. But really, especially with people who have food allergies or caring for people with food allergies, not only are we missing that specific food, but sometimes we just think of the food as the food and not the other things that come with it. So whether it's the birthday party and the excitement of being able to participate in that with our friends and family, whether it's going to the movies and having a snack while we're able to watch the movie, all those other emotional and social components, and not just the physical need to be able to eat something that's safe. And so that's when I think of, okay, fresh fruits, vegetables, fresh produce, everything is great. Depending on the season, depending on where you live, you might have some things that are more plentiful than others, or maybe you don't have access to it, but thinking of how to get those different forms in whenever you can. And of course, frozen. I love frozen. And something I always make sure to touch on too is whether it's fresh, frozen, or dried, 100% juice, canned produce, fruits and vegetables, they all have the same nutrition content. It's just the form that it comes in is different. So like frozen fruits and vegetables, for example, they're picked in the field, and either they go off to come to our stores, our food banks, wherever it might be where we get food, or they're steamed and flash frozen right then and there, and then packaged in the baggies or however we get them frozen or canned or dried, whatever it is. So they're all fresh in that they're not bad. Sometimes I hear from clients that like, oh, I think this is like the bad version of like this certain fruit or vegetable because they couldn't sell it fresh. That's not the case. It's just processed differently. So whether the process being fresh, frozen, canned, dried, or juice even too. And so here we have canned mentioned as well. So you still have those different colors, maybe brighter or darker, depending on what the item it is that we're eating. And then here's the juice that I mentioned as well. So whether that's something that maybe you're trying out and making at home, or something that you've tried out when you've been to a restaurant, or like a farmer's market, or CSA or something like that, they're trying to share different produce. And then dried too. I always think that this is a great one, especially when we consider a lot of us who might travel or work or go to school, whatever it might be, with food allergies. Sometimes we don't always have the ability to carry, like, it would be nice, but also it's a pain sometimes, you know, like a cooler bag or something with like a thermos and like our ice pack and all that kind of stuff of food safe or allergy friendly products. And sometimes we don't have the access to that refrigeration or that cooling piece. So that's why I really love when dried or like shelf stable products come in handy, because it's like I can throw that in my backpack and I know in a pinch when I'm like, oh shoot, I don't have time to stop at the store, or I won't have access to like if you're traveling and maybe like the airplane snack, whatever it might be, isn't something that you can have, you know, you have something that's safe and it's not going to go bad too. So just thinking of ways we can add these different nutrition pieces, but also safe and delicious allergy friendly food items as well. And reading labels, I'm sure this is something that you've been preaching either to other people, or maybe your healthcare practitioner has been like, you have to keep doing this and harping on it. But you really do have to read labels each and every single time. So oftentimes, I mean, you know, if you pick up like, say, like a lemon or a lime in the store, like the only label is going to be like the PC code or whatever to buy it, but not necessarily like ingredients, because it's just like the food product itself. However, if you're getting like, we're using rice noodles. So even though this is one of my favorite brands, and again, nothing is sponsored in this presentation, it's just sharing things that have worked in my home in cooking for allergy friendly. But even though I've bought this brand since probably, I mean, we've had this since I was a kid, so probably like at least 20, 30 years. And I still read the ingredients every time just to make sure, even though you're like, oh, well, it's just rice noodles. Like what else would be in rice noodles? But you never know. Maybe the manufacturers changed. Maybe the recipe, they tweaked it differently or something like that. So always being able to read labels when you can to make sure that it's safe for you or the people that you're taking care of, or maybe if you're having friends or family over for dinner, just those extra steps to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. And then, as most of you know, if not probably already know, based on the answers to the pre-webinar survey, under FALCPA now that it's the top 9 allergens. So sesame was added last year. And not only that, but there the 3 different ways here specifically that allergens must be called out within the ingredient list. So whether it's like the actual name of the ingredient, using the word contains, or in the ingredient list if it's a different one, such as like albumin, and then in parentheses egg. So just keeping in mind those things, and like if this is still something that you're practicing or trying to get comfortable with, this is something I would recommend you reaching out, you know, whether it's like a registered dietitian or your allergist or healthcare practitioner to help you. I wouldn't say master the steps, because this brands and things like that always change, and maybe how they word it or like where they have it on the labels and stuff changes, but just getting in that practice and routine of checking every single time. So that way, you know, the confidence that you have comes with it and being able to purchase something that's safe. And then the top 9 allergens. And then these are the 2 resources that I really love, especially when it comes to talking about fruits and vegetables. So again, on the left, we have safefruitsandveggies.org, and you guys will get a copy of this, like a PDF copy of the presentation along with the recipes, and like the photos are hyperlinked, so you can click on them to go to the website. But I specifically love it because, again, bringing down that fear of like, oh, I can't eat this type of fruit or vegetable because it has, you know, it's not frozen or it's not fresh or it's not canned or dried, whatever it might be. So making you feel comfortable with the choices that you have with the food that's accessible to you. And then over on the right-hand side, thank you, Marie. She dropped in the label resources for you guys there in the chat. And then on the right-hand side, fruits and veggies. I'm one of the ambassadors with that program where we're not telling you need to eat certain brands of fruits or vegetables, but just all fruits and vegetables are great for you. So how can you add more into your day? And I love it because it has an alphabetical list of I'd say like, I think I've seen like every single fruit or vegetable that's like on there in their like index there, but it goes into, okay, like what does it look like? How do I pick a good one from the store? How do I store it? How do I cut it? How do I cook it? Maybe what kind of nutrients are in it? So it kind of gives you like the whole FAQ about like that fruit or vegetable. So I think that's really fun, especially with some of my littles where they're like, Auntie, I want to try this, but I don't really know about that. So we'll go on the website and like choose, you know, whatever fruit or vegetable they want to try. And then we'll learn a little bit about it and then just like try it out, taste it, and see if it's something they want to cook with, and just making it fun and kind of alleviating the stress that comes sometimes with cooking something new. And then the resources are here as well as the one that Marie dropped in the chat. And I know I went through that quickly, but I really want to spend time going through the recipes. So if there's any questions at this time, I think Marie, the Q&A, or if you want to drop in the chat, we'll answer a couple questions.
We have one. So how important is trying to choose fruits and veggies seasonally when you're eating fresh?
To me, honestly, my answer personally and professionally is always gonna be like, what can I afford? So that to me is more important because like, regardless of what our budgets are, we all have some sort of budget, right? And if this is something that for example, if I'm being told this is the only version that I should be getting, but it's not necessarily something I can afford, but I'm only getting it because somebody else is telling me I should get it, that might not be a good choice for me. So instead, choosing fruits and vegetables, oftentimes when they are in season, depending on where you live. So I live in Detroit in the fall, or I guess springtime now, but like in the fall, like apples and like fall veggies are always relatively inexpensive because there's so much that's grown here. But shopping seasonally, if you're able to, is great, but that shouldn't mean that you don't eat things if you can't get them seasonally, if that makes sense.
That was the only question we had so far.
Okay.
So I can,
go ahead.
I'll spotlight the cooking now. Are we ready to switch over to that and watch you do your magic? Or you just tell me when to do that?
I'm ready. Are you guys ready? Maybe some cheers in the comment section. I know it's a Wednesday. We're almost through the week, guys. Thank you for the claps. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and get going with the cooking. And then one thing, as we get into the cooking, I want to make sure, just like I mentioned before, so these are food allergy swaps that I'm making based upon, like, obviously the ingredients are safe for me with my food allergies, and also offering some options for you guys. And then looking at the pre-survey questions that you filled out, poultry, alpha-gal, and eggs, milk, and wheat are like the top 3 kind of categories or items that you mentioned of food allergies. So I have some suggestions here, and we'll be talking through that as we go throughout. But if there's a specific question where you're like, oh, I'm really stumped, my child or whoever I'm taking care of just got diagnosed with this and I have no idea, like it's so overwhelming. I want us to be able to have a space where we're comfortable to like crowdsource, in the comments, but also like use me and use Marie and use us as resources right now. Ask those questions. Hopefully by now, if this is your first presentation with me or you've attended previous ones before, I'm very relaxed and informal, and I understand, dealing with a food allergy is very serious. And at the same time, sometimes like the anxiety and the maybe lack of confidence sometimes comes with it. So I want this to be a safe space for us to be able to ask questions. There are no dumb questions. And just have fun cooking tonight. So whether you're watching or you get the recipes and make it later, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing is we're gonna do 3 different fillings. I have a ginger chicken filling, a turkey deluxe, and a Philly cheesesteak. Because if you know me, yes, I'm a chef, but also I like to call myself like a home cook, because whether I'm cooking for myself or friends and family and stuff that are over, cooking is really exhausting, especially if it's your job during the day and then you come home and you're like, okay, well, I have to cook something for a meal now too. So I try to think of like how I can kind of cook once and get multiple meals out of like what I'm making. So that's kind of how I set up today's conversation, and the theme of like rolling into the new year of trying to make it a little bit easier on us, and not setting the bar, the expectation so high that like if we don't achieve it, we feel like we're not doing anything. Because at the end of the day, this is something that like we're making something allergy friendly and fun. So try not to put too much additional stress on yourself for that. So hopefully that is a space for you to feel comfortable with that. And so then the 3 wraps that we're using are going to be rice paper. And I'll go through these in detail when we get to that point too, as we go through each one. But rice paper as the first like wrap or vessel that you're serving it in. The second one would be tortillas. And I'll show you guys, we have corn tortillas and flour tortillas. And some that are made just from like soy, like tofu, and I think rice flour and tapioca flour are like the binder with that. And then spring rolls or egg rolls, depending on what you call them, with the egg free, but like wheat or flour based wrapper. So it's the one that you typically either put in the air fryer, bake, or fry. And then I kind of think of this as, do they call this a Punnett square? Is that too nerdy, or am I just trying to be nerdy and it like doesn't fit? But so basically on the left, we have here the fillings that we have. So the ginger chicken, the turkey deluxe, and the Philly cheesesteak. And then like the wrappers on the top. So there's the rice paper tortillas and spring rolls. And you can kind of like mix and match each one of those. So like, even though I might not be covering one where you're like, oh, that would be such a great thing, go for it. Like if it's something you know that you love, or your kids or your family, friends, whatever it might be, love, like this is for you to kind of mix and match and get creative with it if you want to. Or if you're like, no, like I'm going to stick to what she does, like that's fine too. And then maybe build your confidence to step out and try maybe adding more different vegetables to it, or maybe different seasonings, whatever it might be. So there's no right or wrong way. And Marie, I saw there's
Yeah, so there was a question that came in, and this is a great question, right? So ginger chicken, maybe a little exotic for younger kids. And
Mhm.
so Kimberly's asking, how do I introduce things to my 1-year-old? Like things like this. And I don't think she's talking about like allergy introduction, but in terms of like things that may
Different
not be
foods.
in her typical palate or something that she's had before. So maybe as you're cooking, you can share some ideas about that.
Yeah, and I'll also preface that like I don't have kids, but I'm an auntie, tia, emo to many, many, many kids, and all of them are so different in what they love and don't love. And that's regardless of their backgrounds of like how, I don't want to say exotic, that's kind of like how diverse the food groups or spices that are added into it. So the same way, like if you're trying this for the first time, maybe don't season it super heavily. So it's just like you have like just like a touch of the taste in there to see if like you even like that flavor. And then as maybe you get comfortable to it, or your child does too, like adding more and more to that. Or if you're like, I don't like this piece, but I want to add this piece, that's where you can kind of get creative and put your own touch on it too. Does that answer your question? Hopefully, and of course, ask questions throughout, and I'll make sure to put some interjections as we go along too.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the first one we have is our ginger chicken roll-ups. You're welcome, Kimberly. And Marie and I were just kind of laughing about this. I always am so ambitious and put recipes together for you guys, but then like the actual cook along is very like ad lib. So again, this is, I think of recipes as like templates. They're not like hard and fast rules of like you have to do this. Because I also think of like what's in my kitchen, what's gonna be at my grocery store, like what can I get? So don't feel like you have to, yes, thank you, Anita, cooking with love, exactly. So don't feel like you have to do exactly what I'm doing. You can get creative with it too. And so this, you guys can see my lovely hands over here. These are the Philly cheesesteak roll-ups. These will be our turkey deluxe rolls. And then these are the ginger chicken roll-ups that we're going to be doing. But I'm going to go ahead and put these up top here for now as we go through the ingredients for the first ginger chicken roll-ups. Okay. So roll-ups is just something like my family and I always called it this. It's Vietnamese like goi kun, like rice paper wrapped. So as I mentioned earlier, rice paper comes like this. So it comes dry. And again, none of these are sponsored, or I'm saying these are the brands that you must get, but these are just brands that either I personally like, or just like what my store has. So sometimes it doesn't necessarily match up. But these are two different kinds. So this one, I like it because it's resealable. And I always recommend the larger size. They have smaller ones too, but I like a lot of filling in mine, and I always overstuff mine. So I like to think that using a bigger wrapper gives me a little more air or room for error. So if you're just starting out with roll-ups, maybe do that as well, so you won't be so frustrated if it breaks. But if it breaks, it's perfect because these are so thin, and once we wet them with water, I just use it as like kind of like tape, I guess. Like, and just you can roll another one over it and it just patches it up really easily. Okay. And then this is another one that was at this one, I think from Walmart, and this one was from like my local Asian market. So again, depending on where you're able to shop or whatever is available at the stores, just the rice paper. Okay, so that's the outside vessel, and that's what turns into this clear, soft texture that we're able to hold everything inside. And the different types of fillings that I like kind of vary depending on honestly what veggies I have kicking around in my fridge, or like if somebody's coming over, if they eat certain proteins or not. So again, thinking of different allergies or dietary restrictions. I'm using ground turkey for this one. You can use ground chicken. You can use, as I mentioned, if you have, I had like leftover rotisserie chicken and just shredded it, and you can use that as like the protein for this too. You could use ground pork, ground beef, any sort of protein of your choice. So whether it's an allergy, a taste preference, or just you want to try something new, feel free to mix and match what makes the most sense for you, but ultimately what's the safest choice too. Um, and I have in here to use like veggies of your choice. And I am not above getting prepped veggies when and if I can. So one of my favorite things to do, especially for something like this, is either if you have access to like a salad bar at your grocery store, get like maybe some coleslaw, like some shredded cabbage and peppers, mushrooms, whatever kind of veggies you want. Or you can always get they were out of like the coleslaw mix. So I just used like a broccoli slaw mix. So it's the same thing here, just like some shredded veggies. And so that's what I ended up sauteing with the ginger, the garlic, and the soy sauce or tamari or coconut aminos, depending on which veggies or seasonings you add in. And then another thing I wanted to mention too. So again, taking the hand when you need it, or if you want to, because oftentimes a lot of these, since they're already prepped, they'll be marked down on sale. And if you're able to shop at night time, perhaps like sometimes they'll discount it like after 6 or 7 at night, which is nice too. And then another one of my favorites is canned mushrooms. So again, there's nothing wrong with using pre-packaged or processed fruits and vegetables. They're just steamed and cooked right when they're, picked from the field. So this is another way too, because mushrooms, as you probably maybe may or may not know, they go bad so quickly. So this is a nice way to be able to like add that flavor and the nutrients in there without necessarily worrying about it going bad. Okay. And then rice noodles. These are the medium ones, but I like to use for the roll-ups either the medium or the small size, so like M or S, because the fat noodles, or I say fat noodles, the large ones are like thicker, kind of like fettuccine or like a pappardelle, kind of almost really thick. And those are delicious, but like because the noodles are kind of an accent in the roll-up, I don't want huge bits of noodles that are in there. So we're going for the smaller ones, which you'll be able to see here. So you can see, and this is something fun that I like to do with my littles if I'm cooking with them. And so once the noodles are cooked and cooled, I'll have them do little bundles. So that way, when you pick up the noodles, it's like in one little package ready to go into each roll. And it's fun because, of course, like what kid doesn't love playing with their food? And the same thing here with the shredded lettuce. So what did I use? This is for the other ones too. But again, taking the hand when you need it, it's already chopped veggies or chopped lettuce. So if you go through enough that you're like, I can just do this at home, that's fine. It's no big deal. Or if this is something where like this is not an extra step that I have time for or the desire to do, again, take those extra steps if and when you're able to. And then just some chopped green onions and some cilantro. Everyone either loves it or hates it. I personally love it, but I think it's also because I grew up eating like tons of cilantro. So these are this is the base of what we're going to be using to roll. And so what I'm going to do is show you how I roll it. And so we have our dry, and it's starting to curl just because like the natural humidity in air, and with this being a dry product, it's just going to start to get the moisture in there. And then I just use typically, it's just a bowl of water. I know some people are like, it needs to be like boiling hot water, but I find when it's hot, it gets soft way too fast. And then I'm like, trying to like, you'll see it gets, you'll see it gets like very flimsy so that you can roll it. So I kind of like doing just like lukewarm or like cold water. So I'll dip it in all around. And if you're like me, you already broke it, so that's fine. So we're gonna put this in here. And I'm gonna put this broken part towards the end here because I roll from bottom to top. So it's going to be covered at the top anyways. So that's like, you'll see it'll come together. Okay. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I go for the larger rolls because I always am notorious for putting too much filling in. But I'm going to try to be gentle and go lightly here to be able to show you how to do it. So I typically put, some lettuce down. And the thing about the different textures too is like, I think of the different textures that are in the roll, but also the flavors that come with it too. So again, if you're like, oh, my kids aren't going to eat like cilantro or something, like leave it out, that's fine. And something that's fun too, that I think a lot of that are, on social media especially, is making like really colorful rolls. So there's different, I've seen people do like fruit in them too, which I mean, it wouldn't be bad. I've never tried that, but it just looks really vibrant and pretty. So I put the whatever kind of bright veggies, whatever is up top here, because as I roll up, that's going to be what shows on the outside.
So
Or
Tessa,
on the,
speaking of cilantro, somebody
Mhm.
asked, fresh versus dried herbs. What's your take on that?
So dried herbs for this would be really, really strong. So what I would recommend if you're like, I really want that flavor, cook it in with the protein and the veggies. So that way it has time to, because it's dried, so there's no moisture in it, it'll absorb the moisture of the protein in the vegetables and have time to release its flavor. Whereas if I sprinkled the dry herbs on this and rolled it up like and you ate it, all you would taste is just this of just like whatever that herb is. So I would recommend putting it and cooking it with the veggies and the protein.
Thank you. I learned something tonight. That would explain why sometimes when I put dried herbs in my meatloaf, it tastes just like dried Italian herb mix. And so I should
Yes.
be, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So like with the
Mind blown.
meatloaf, yay, we learned something. Um, or with the meatloaf too, like if you saute, I think people do like onions and garlic or whatever it is, make sure you add that in the beginning so it has time to rehydrate. And so with our filling, like I said, I have the broccoli slaw mix in here and our canned mushrooms. And then I use, like I said, the ground turkey, but you can use beef, pork, chicken, whatever protein that works for you, not only with your allergens, but also making sure that's something that you want to eat and want to try. And so I, you see how I kind of kept things somewhat in like this little rectangle. And so what I like to do is, so my little part that I broke, I bring this up here and I'm kind of pressing and tucking as I do to make sure everything's nice and tight. And then once I get to like this part is when I'll put here. And now I fold in the sides. It doesn't matter if you do the left or the right first. It doesn't matter because that just serves as it'll close on the sides. And then I roll up, hence the name, roll up. And then you have your little roll up ready to eat. And I'm gonna do another one too, because I know I went kind of fast, so you can see it again. But then you see how soft that got compared to what we had before. And so one thing I would also recommend, so these I made just before we started, and they're getting a little bit hard. So if you want to make these maybe like, excuse me, like a day before, if you're having a bunch of people over, oftentimes I'll do this where like my friends, it'll be like a make your own roll up party. So we make them like as we're eating dinner. But if you want to make them beforehand, I would put them in a single layer, like either on a like a plate or in a dish, and then a damp paper towel in between each row, so that it's not wet, like it's not going to soak through and rip it apart, but it keeps it moist enough so it doesn't get hard again and crunchy, because that'll tear your teeth up. Okay, so we're gonna do the next one. And you see, I'm not putting it in the water long. It's just like literally enough to get it just wet. So again, put it down and do some of my veggies or my lettuce. And again, if you're like, I don't really like this kind of lettuce, like just use what fits for you and your taste buds. Maybe we'll do some cilantro at the top this time. And some green onions. And traditionally, like, or not necessarily traditionally, but growing up, we would eat these quite a bit where we would have like a hot pot in the middle of the table, and then we would cook the protein like to order, if that makes sense. So it'd be like sliced chicken or sliced pork, whatever it might be, cooking it and then putting it in our roll. So the meat wasn't seasoned, and then we would dip it into like a sweet and sour sauce or like soy sauce, depending on whatever we wanted. But as I've grown up, I really enjoy the flavor within the roll and like the less messy part of dipping it sometimes. So that's why I chose to do this one where all the flavor is like packed into the seasoned veggies and protein. So again, you see it rolling up and kind of pressing down up to the green. Put my sides in and then roll it up. And we have those two ready to go. Any questions before we go on to our next recipe? Unless you can join our buddies over here. And I always think of my grandma. She made like probably thousands of these in her lifetime, and we would go through them pretty fast, unfortunately.
I don't see any questions, Tessa.
Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna put up our next thing and then go ahead and reset. So just give me a second, please.
So I think one of the nice things about those roll-ups is that you can, if you're vegetarian, you can do all veggies, or I know we had several people who signed up with poultry and chicken allergies, so they could replace with really anything else. And I love, like, this is a perfect meal for like, what do I have in my refrigerator?
Yes,
And that's kind of how we do things around here, usually by about Wednesday or Thursday. And so I think that having some of those rice paper wraps in the house will be awesome to help with leftovers and other things like that, where you don't have quite enough to make a whole meal, but you've got a little bit of different things. So that's great.
exactly. And I think that's a great point that you mentioned, Maria, like the food waste aspect. Like you don't really need much of each ingredient, so it's perfect to kind of mix and match. Alrighty, folks, we're gonna go. Ooh, shrimp would be nice too. To our turkey deluxe spirals. So as I mentioned before, we have our ingredients. So I'm fortunate to live in an area that has a very large like Hispanic or Latinx population. And so I say this in terms of like allergies of like knowing that their corn tortillas they make there because they have the masa, you know, have the masa, mix it up, and then lay it out into the tortillas, and then they toast them there on the comal. So if you have like a wheat allergy, I am comfortable eating these because I know they just have corn that's processed there, and they make that. They also make in a different part. They have flour tortillas, and then these are just the like store brands like spinach veggie whatever more so has like green dye in it, which is fine, but just something fun and festive as a tortilla too. So whether it's a tortilla wrap, whatever you want to call it, just some sort of vessel in which we can roll together and eat it as is. So you can like heat it up like I did some of these with like the cheese, and it gets really nice and toasty and yummy. But also just you're thinking, okay, maybe I need to pack lunch for my kids, or they're going on a field trip, or I need something for work, like something that's easy to put together with like no time. And then it's got all the components of everything that you need in there too. So the one thing is I'm going to say corn tortillas, as you may or might not know, even though they're pretty like flexible like this, if I were to try to roll I keep them in my fridge so they don't spoil. As I roll it, because they're cold, you see it starting to split. So this, I would recommend if you want to use corn tortillas to, like I'll put them on a plate, like I'll splay them out, like kind of lay them out like this, like on a plate, and then sprinkle, just like get my hand wet with some water and sprinkle some water, and then put in the microwave for maybe like 10 or 15 seconds, just so it's warm enough to get pliable and you can roll it without it breaking like this. So that's the thing for those. And talking through our other ingredients, we have our tortillas. I am very picky about mayo. I have a certain brand that I really love, and if you're from the South, this might be fighting words, but it's this specific brand that is a yellow and black brand of mayonnaise. Any sort of spread that you want to, or if you have avocado or guacamole, salsa, any sort of spread that you want to use. Mustard is a good one too. And I love sour things, like salty and sour are like my two favorite flavors. And they now have dill relish. So it's the same as like regular pickle relish, I guess, like sweet gherkins that are typically chopped up, but it's dill if you don't have or don't want to use like pickle slices or pickles. So we have that. And then again, my handy dandy salad kit. I understand that a lot of these salad kits will have allergens in them. However, whether there's some brands that are just like the chopped vegetables, no dressing in them, that's a great option. Or like this one, as I mentioned, like for my food allergies, I love using those because that is also a good filler where if it has the dressing in it, I'll just mix it up with the veggies and then put my tortilla out, put my salad in there and lunch meat rolled up, and that's done. So just thinking of those like shortcuts that we can use to help us be able to, not only have a meal faster, but also if it's something that fits our allergy needs or dietary restrictions, don't be afraid to take those shortcuts that really are there for us to a convenience factor if we can do it. There's that. And then our cheese, again, not saying certain brands are better than others, but I've just found that this Chow brand or Chow Creamery specifically, I really like the texture and the taste of it when it's cold, but also when it melts. So as like their sliced cheese, which looks like this, I really enjoy the flavor of it when it's cold and when it's melted. And I'm sure whether you're kind of just starting out down that journey and trying to figure out which one works for you and your family, or if you're seasoned, you're like, this is my go-to. Everyone has a preference on which kind of plant-based or non-dairy cheese that they like.
Tess, a quick question.
Yes.
To soften the tortillas, I'm assuming this is a question, can they put inside a plastic bag at the same time in the microwave?
Yes, because there is moisture within the tortilla, and the plastic bag, as you heat it up, the plastic bag is like keeping it all locked in there. So it's the same thing that it'll keep it nice and soft. But again, keeping to the like 10, 15 seconds, like not too long.
Great, thanks.
Yes, that's a good question. Okay, so then our different toppings, as I mentioned, we have our cheese, some other veggies that I had, or sorry, other lettuce. I have baby arugula. I really love the texture, but also like the pepperiness that comes with baby arugula. So whether we're using the chopped kit or the baby arugula, and some thin sliced red onion, you could add tomatoes, cucumbers, carrots, whatever kind of veggies you want, or if you're just like, or you just do it turkey, cheese, and bacon, totally fine. And then pickles that I dried off because I don't want them to be soggy in the roll. So that's why they might look a little dry because I just patted them off with like a paper towel. And then our fillings. So again, not a certain brand, any sort of like if you have leftover rotisserie chicken, if you have the sliced lunch meat that we have here, if you have leftover steak from the night before, like even though I have turkey in this recipe, again, use what is safe for you. So it doesn't have the allergies that you have present and your dietary restrictions, and also just kind of getting creative with whatever flavors that you want. So I have the turkey here and then also some bacon bits. So again, you can leave the bacon out, or you can use, I know they have so many different plant protein bacons now, whether it's soy-based or some that are like eggplant, I think is another one too. Or if you just want to leave it out, that's totally fine. Totally up to you. Okay, so let's do, and I'm gonna put these in the microwave for like 10 seconds. So TV time, but real time, 10 seconds. Just because knowing my luck, I would probably crack it even though they're fine. All right. All right, so we have, let me plug this back in so I don't lose you guys. All right, so we'll do our lovely green one first. So let's see. We'll do Duke's, oh, sorry, mayonnaise, whatever brand spread you want to use. So I'll just do a little bit. And then I also love like Dijonaise, I think is like a fancy thing now, but some Dijon mustard or mustard too. And then, as I said, I love the salty sour element. I'm gonna put some of my dill relish on this one too. And then you can just use a knife or a spoon, spatula, whatever you have. I just like to, I think of it the same as how we did our roll-ups. I kind of work in this part here because I know it's going to spread everywhere, but I don't want it to spread so much that it's going to be too hard for me to roll. So kind of like this area. Okay. And then put down some of the greens, some of the bacon bits. And then let's do our cheese. And then our turkey. And then the same thing like the roll up. I start from the bottom. So I do like one here, one over, and it'll probably crack. It's okay. And then roll it up as tight or as loose as you want it to be. And then I like keeping it like this if I am going out for the day and I know I'm going to eat this later, or for the kids, like for their lunches. But for being able to eat it right now, or if you want to make it as an appetizer, it would help if I had a knife, right? We can cut it either in half, or we can do the little rolls with the other one too. So then you have it like this. It's really plain, but also delicious. And just have it like that. Or we can do this version, the flour tortilla. We'll do mayo. And this is also fun too, because, you know, like I said, these are templates for recipes. So like this is kind of cool. You can lay up, you know, making sure all the toppings and stuff are safe for yourself or whoever you're cooking for. But then also being able to have your kids or whoever it is kind of mix and match or like build your own sandwich. So there's a lot of options there. I'm just gonna do mayo on this one. And we have 6 more minutes until Q&A, right, Marie? Or about 5 or 6?
Yeah, we can take time.
Okay, perfect. Put some onion. Maybe some pickle on this one.
And I would also encourage people, if they have questions, just to also just put them in the Q&A now. And
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Turkey. So you see, it's not really complicated of a recipe. It's more so kind of figuring out what you have access to, what you like, what your kids like. For this one. And you can see like the little rolls. If you have those like fancy little toothpicks, those are fun too. It's a lot of different ways. Or the end pieces, you can always just do like a little half sandwich or roll up like that. You have those. Any questions on that recipe before we move to our last one? The Philly cheesesteak rolls.
So yes, can you toast it?
Yes. So
Yes, okay.
yes. So that's why I wanted to show these because I know we wouldn't have time to do all of them like this. But these are the ones that I made with the flour tortillas and then just the turkey, bacon, cheese, and then I cut them up and then either like your toaster oven or your air fryer or like what's the other one? Air fryer or regular oven. I forget, they're all the same thing, but toasting it as long as you want to until they're crispy. And then the cheese gets nice and bubbly too, which is nice. Okay. So our last
And
one we
then,
had. Oh, go ahead.
quick question. An affordable, oh, this is for the next one, an affordable steak swap.
Yes. So I call it Philly cheesesteak, but I use ground beef. Because ground beef typically is less expensive than if you were to buy like a steak or a roast or anything like that. So that's why I call it that. Excuse me, because I'm drawing from those flavors, but not necessarily the price point of like a Philly cheesesteak, which is typically made from like sliced ribeye, which is delicious, but it's considerably more expensive. So that's why I'm using ground beef in this one, as well as I mentioned before, we're drawing on using those convenient products when we have the ability to, of the frozen veggies to add in there as well. Because typically, like when you think of different cuts of protein, whether it's like chicken or pork or beef, if it's ground, it's the, like for example, they're cutting like a roast, they're cutting off those like really pretty even pieces and then selling that, but the end pieces are still delicious. They might not necessarily be equal or even, and those are the parts that they're grinding into like the ground meat. So they're still quality pieces, quality pieces of meat. It's just less expensive because they've ground it together. So hopefully that helps. And then I know sometimes depending on my store, fresh ground beef can be less or more than frozen ground beef. And again, it's the same thing. They've just processed it or ground the beef and then kept some of it fresh or frozen some of it to be able to keep for longer. So not being afraid to like kind of look for those options or shopping those sales. If you're like, well, ground beef's not on sale like turkey is or chicken or whatever it might be, like use that as a swap as well. Hopefully that helps. All right. And so our last one that we have here, this one is plant-based. So this one is an eggless wrapper. And then this one here is one of the favorites that I like that is safe for us. This one is eggless as well, but it's with wheat and with milk. So again, keeping in mind those the ingredients and reading the labels each and every time to make sure that it's safe for you. And then you can either use the sliced cheese that I mentioned before, or we're using some dairy-free, and I like this brand. Their shreds are really yummy. And again, it's just a personal preference of I like their stuff that's as is, or when it's like cold like this, or if you melt it, it's really nice too. And then the ground beef that I seasoned with some garlic, we have the beef there. Again, the canned mushrooms, again, drawing on whether it's fresh or frozen fruits and veggies, they're all good for you. And then the frozen peppers and onions mix. And so with the wrappers, it's the same thing as the other ones that I had mentioned before. I ripped those too, sorry. These are super tender. These gonna be the same thing, except for these being square. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep it like a triangle like this. And I'm gonna do like half a slice of this as my guard or as my guide at the lower point here. And again, less is more, especially for these, because when you bake or fry these, you don't want them to burst open and pop in the oven or the fryer. So less is more when you're filling up these specifically. the egg rolls or spring rolls. Okay. So we got that. And tightly. The same thing, bring in the sides. And you see how the cheese is the guiding point there. Put this guy back in. And then I just have a little bit of water here as my like glue, if you will, and then just rolling it up like this. So even though they look small, again, we don't want to put too much because you saw how delicate these are, especially the ones that are dairy free or egg free, they tend to be more delicate. So then that's sealed there. And then I'm able to bake it, fry it, however you want to cook these, so that the outside is nice and crispy and the filling is already cooked. So we don't have to worry about, you know, the beef or the meat being raw. And then it ends up looking like our rolls that we have here. I know these are kind of bigger. And then along with the other rolls that we made earlier too. I know that last one went quickly, but trying to keep in mind our time that we have here with you guys. I hope you enjoy making these. These are always so fun for me, and I just really love being able to make some of my favorite foods for you guys, and then based on your suggestions. So feel free, you know, each time we try to make the class really fun and inviting for you to be able to like, oh, I want to make this recipe. I don't know how to do it. And just make allergy friendly cooking fun and exciting. So thank you guys for joining us, and I'll toss it to Marie to wrap up. And any questions that you have, please feel free to drop those into the chat or the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Tessa. I'm hungry now. Um, I don't see any questions. I'll give everyone a minute to put a question in there and to see if anyone has any questions. But I think these were what I really loved about these recipes was that they could be used if you have a food allergy or if you have food preferences, like you're vegetarian or for religious reasons you're not eating a certain item. These are all so versatile. And I think the other thing is, so for those of us who have little kids, well, I shouldn't say that, mine's not little anymore, but for those of you with little kids who maybe, you know, they might not want the mushrooms and the cabbage, but you don't have to cook a separate meal. You can get everything you need and like do fillings, like kind of have a filling party, like what you talked about, like having friends over and doing that. And like, say maybe the kid just wants a chicken nugget rolled up in there or with some
Yeah.
ketchup. And you can sneak in a few things. So I think it's super versatile, and you know, I think my colleague was thinking that we should have a little we should have people make something and send us photos, and we can make a little contest or something. So
Yes,
I
that'd be
would love
awesome.
that. And so for everyone listening, as soon as we hit the end button here, you will see something that pops up, and it will be a survey. And if you miss it, don't worry. Zoom will automatically send out a follow-up email tomorrow, so 24 hours. So be on the lookout for that. I will put the links to some key resources. I will put some links to the recipes, and also put the link to the survey in there again. So thank you, everyone. And I'll just give it a couple more seconds to see if anyone has questions, and then we will sign off.
Hopefully everyone's hungry by now.
Yeah, everyone's going to go cook. Well, it depends what time zone you're in.
That's true.
I know we have some people in California, and that's dinner time there. Those
They're
of
like,
us on the
let's
East
go.
Coast are about ready for a cup of chamomile tea and off to bed. So
Yes.
thank you, everyone. We'll have one more, or we have two more coming up, and the next one will be the second week of May, May 3rd,
I'm like,
May 14th or
I forget.
15th, May 15th. And I believe that one we're going to focus on how to shop and prepare if, you know, you're in a food desert and you have the dollar store or the Dollar Tree or the corner store is really your only accessible food
Yeah.
source. So we're going to do something on how to cook healthy and safe using those kind of businesses. So everyone that attends will get that information when we have it ready. But thank you, Tessa, as always. Awesome job. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.